Hey guys, Danny Stern here, and today I'm going to show you my new script for After Effects called ShadeThrower. It's a really simple, quick way to add different types of shading and lighting effects to layers inside your comp. So, to install it, you just need to copy these two objects into your Scripts UI panels folder, which can be found on a Mac inside your After Effects application, and for PC it should be similar. So once you've installed it, come up here in After Effects to Window, and then down to ShadeThrower, and it will pop up as a nice dockable UI that you can put anywhere inside your workspace. So let's have a look how it works. We've got three buttons here: noise shading, flat shading, and 3D shading, and a button to add a global control. Let's look at the flat shading first. So with any layer selected, it can be a pre-comp, a text layer, shape layer, come over here and press the flat shading. And straight away we've got a nice kind of cell shading look around the edges of our layer. Now if we take a look up here at the effects controls, you can see a whole bunch of stuff has been added. That's because when we press this button, it's actually applying an effects preset using pseudo effects. So we can collapse all of these and we can see a whole bunch of After Effects effects that we don't need to worry about for now. All we need to worry about is this top controller, which has everything we need to control the shading. So firstly we can see there's an angle controller which rotates the shading around the edges of your layer. We've got distance, so that's how far in it will go from the layer. Edge offset, when it's set to 0, it will be right up against the edge of that alpha channel, but we can inset it inwards. Smoothness. At 0, we can see some of these edges are starting to get a bit sharp and flat, so smoothness will round out the corners of those shading edges. Glossiness is a bit of a bonus setting. It's just to kind of shrink the shading in a little bit more, make it a bit more circular. And then we can change the color. We can lower the opacity on top of the original layer. And then we can choke the edge inwards or make it bigger as well. So quite a lot of control over the sizing and placement of that shading. And we've even got a blur setting here so that you can actually soften it out and add a bit of soft shading to the edges of the layer as well. Now at the moment this is just a single shade that's being comped on top of our original layer. You can see the text is orange. If we turn this off, we'll actually just get the shading. So this is where we can start to layer multiple instances. If you duplicate this object, you can add a highlight, a shadow, and you can comp them all together if this is off. Now if we come back here, if we've got this on, we can go to the blending mode. We can set it to multiply, which you can't actually see, but if we make it a darker color, you'll be able to see. And if we go to add, we get a nice bright addition. And this will work like any other After Effects blending modes, screen and overlay as well. Okay, let's take a look at the noise shader. So with any layer selected, I can come up here and press the noise shader, and straight away I've got some noise gradient around the edges of my layer. And again, we can collapse this and we just have to worry about the top controls. Now by default, this is set to quite high because the text here is quite thin. Let's have a little play. Let's firstly turn down the softness quite a bit and the distance. And now we can kind of see how it's affecting the edge. So we've got three shading types here: edge, linear, and radial. Let's have a look at the edge one. Again, we've got the angle. We can ignore gradient start and gradient end for a second. We've got the distance, how far it comes in, the softness. We've got the noise amount, so if we make this 0, we've actually got no noise at all. We've just got a regular shading around the edge of our layer. Then we've got noise size, so we can make this actually really big, or we can make it very, very fine, very small. I find anywhere between 2 and 5 is good for the traditional gradient noise look. And then frame rate. So if I play this back at the moment, you can see that my noise is moving at 3 frames a second. And if I make this 12, which is the frame rate of my current comp, we're going to get a new noise pattern on every frame of the timeline. And if we make this 0, it's going to be completely static the whole time. Now at the moment, just like the flat shading, we've got our composite on original turned on. If we turn that off, we're back here to our original two colors. So we can start playing around with two types of colors that we like. And if we come down here, we've got an invert button, we've got contrast. So this is a really cool setting to crunch the noise, make it quite crushed and dithered. I think this is a really nice setting to play with in tandem with some of the other options. And then we've got some compositing settings. So opacity will just fade it out over the original layer. You can see our orange here is being shown underneath. If we have composite on original on, you can see here we're not going to see much. We've got to reset these colors back to black and white and then start playing around from there. So at the moment multiply is on, so there's no white showing through, so we can show our color 1, which will start to tint the multiply. Might just make this slightly different color so we can see what's going on. Yeah, we've got some multiply, and then if we want to do a highlight, for example, we turn that to screen. We could invert the colors, and let's just make sure we put this back to black so we're not affecting the original color. Now we can start to play with some highlight type effects. and overlay is the last one. So you've got quite a lot of control over the compositing. Let's have a look at a global controller. Here I've got a pattern that's animating in a pre-comp, and this is where it starts to become really powerful. Let's add just a basic noise to this layer, and this is going to be our base. So let's pick 2 colors. Let's pump up that contrast. One thing I didn't show you is if we change this from edge, we've got a linear and a radial option as well. So when I change it to linear, we've got our 2 points here that we can just map a gradient across a layer. So it's not using the edge, and similarly with radial, it's like any other radial gradient. So this is good for background. So if I click my background here, I could add this noise, change this to radial, and I've got some cool shading just using a radial gradient because there's no alpha channel. Alright, coming back here, let's put this back to edge. So as I said, this is our base layer. What we want to do is we want to stack some multiple copies on top. So if I just duplicate this, now I've got a new copy. Let's call this highlight. And what I want to do is I want to make the colors back to black and white. Now, if I come and click here, add global control, it's going to add a null object that gives me a global angle, a global frame rate, and a global noise size. So each of these layers now, there's global controls, its defaults to be turned on, and it's going to react to the global shading. And I can turn that off if I want, but you'll see how this is going to be quite useful. So let's invert this and we'll make a highlight. As you can see, the shading, the light's coming from the top. I want this highlight to be offset 180 degrees, so it's coming from the right direction. So under global angle offset, let's make this 180 degrees. And now let's change the transfer mode to screen on the layer itself. Now I can start to change this color. And I can lower the distance, I can lower the softness. I've still got independent control over it. And I can now animate this angle, and it will control both of those layers, the highlight and the shadow. And I've also got a global frame rate and global noise size controller as well. So when I play this back, you can see it's going at 3 frames a second. If I bump this up to 12 on both of those layers, it's going to now... Oh, sorry, that was the noise size, not the frame rate. Put that back. But you can see it works. I'll make one more copy of this. I'll delete this effect stack. And let's add the flat shader now instead of the noise shader. And this is also going to react to the same global control by default. So I've got global controls here. You can turn it on and off. It's just got an angle controller because there's no noise on this one. So we'll turn off Composite on Original. And you can see now I've got shading, flat shading that's also following the same contours. What I want to do is I want to rotate this another 180 degrees so because it's a highlight. And let's make this one really thin towards the edge of the layer. Turn up the edge offset. And let's just, for fun, let's just blur this one, see what it looks like. I can set this transfer mode to something like add, or too much, maybe overlay, or yeah, overlay is quite nice. And let's just increase the distance again, just so we can see it a bit better. Turn the opacity down. And then we can duplicate this one as well. The bottom one, we can drag it back a bit, create an offset of it. So it's behind, and let's actually make this one a flat shader. I'll just fill this one with my base color. I'll duplicate it again and add my flat shading to this one. And turn off Composite on Original. Now I've got some alternate stuff happening in the background there. So it's really powerful when you've got a pre-comp and you can add multiple copies using a combination of the internal blending modes and also the regular layer blending modes with different opacities. And then the last thing I want to show you is the 3D panel. So over here I've got very simple 3D animation. This is using Element 3D. And you can see all it is just a plain lighting pass, grey, white, black. And if I come over here and I press the 3D button, it's going to add the same shading that we had on our noise shader, but it's just going to affect the 3D lighting that's already on the layer. So again, all we need is this shading 3D control. And here we've got a pre-brightness and a pre-contrast, so we can tune in how the lighting was on that layer originally if it wasn't set up correctly. Sometimes things are going to be more grey, more white, more black than you would like. We've got noise amount similarly to our other shader, noise size, contrast, colors, frame rate, and this is also going to react, well actually it won't react to the global controls for the angle, but it will for the frame rate and the noise size, because there's no angle for the 3D, it's being defined by the 3D lighting itself. Okay, well I hope this was helpful and I hope you have fun playing around with it, and any questions hit me up and enjoy.